8 years after losing $30,000 on my first rental, I had retired at the age of 31 with 14 properties. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what went wrong, the one real estate strategy that turned everything around, and a technique that allows you to recycle your money into more properties without having to constantly save up a full down payment again. So it all began when I was 23 years old. I was sitting on my bed, barely able to catch my breath. The pharmacist union just told me that I could be fired from my job. I replayed everything in my head. I had got involved in some coworker drama and my bosses were trying to teach me a lesson. But what's worse is because I grew up in an Asian household where you're not allowed to fail, I could only think about how much shame I'd feel in front of my parents if I told them that I lost my job. What if they started seeing me as a failure of a son, the son who couldn't handle the real world? Then there was also the realization that I was expendable and my boss could replace me with somebody else the next morning. And then everything that I worked so hard for, climbing the corporate ladder, my income, my reputation, and my financial security would be gone up in an instant. How could I let another person, my boss, have so much control over my life? I was so stressed, burned out, and exhausted every day going into work, wondering if that will be my last day there. And I started developing excruciating stomach pains that didn't allow me to sleep. The doctors ran a slew of tests. They put me to sleep and stuck a camera down my throat to look for cancer, or possibly an autoimmune disease. I waited for weeks in anticipation, still in horrible pain, while I took 2 weeks off of work. When the results finally came back, the doctors had concluded that I had a permanent disease called IBS that resulted from high levels of daily stress. So my mental stress had some very real physical consequences on my body. I stopped being able to process food normally without having stomach pains. These events led me to develop a strong desire to create my own financial independence. You see, around this time, I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which taught me that the rich buy assets, which put money in your pocket, while the poor buy liabilities, which take money out of your pocket at the end of every month. An example of an asset is a rental, because it puts money into your pocket every month. So I was super excited to escape the rat race, but it always seemed so far away. I had no idea how to take that first step to get started in real estate. So I ended up basically winging it. But luckily, I stumbled upon a strategy that really accelerated my progress to building up my wealth to have financial freedom. I would consider it a cheat code that I was very lucky to find. It started out like this. I had a friend in college who did something very smart. While I was living in the college dormitories, having to suffer from a roommate that played Call of Duty until 1 a.m., my friend instead bought a house with his aunt as a guarantor on the loan. He lived in the master bedroom and rented out all of the other bedrooms to his college buddies. Not only did he live for free, but he also made some cash flow on top of that. In fact, he doubled the typical rental income that you usually would make on that rental. Think of it like selling a pizza. You can sell one whole pizza for $20, as you can see up here. Or you can divide that same pizza into 6 slices and sell each slice for $7 per slice, which makes $42. Even though it's the same pizza, you make double the money. This is exactly what happens in renting by the bedroom, because instead of renting out the box, you're renting out the space inside the box, which doubles your normal rental income. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so that you can hear more videos like this that teach busy professionals how to get into real estate investing as a newbie. Now, I knew what I wanted to do in real estate, but I was afraid to take that first step. So afraid, in fact, that my dad was getting fed up about how much I talked about this big vision of owning multiple rental properties. He said, "All I hear is talk, talk, talk. You don't take any action. I don't think you have what it actually takes." And he was right to a degree. I kept doing research, but I was really just paralyzed to take any action at all. I was becoming the kind of person whose plans never come to fruition, the kind of person who keeps kicking the can down the road, the one who had a shot but never took it. If you're in this position right now, the important thing is to recognize it and confront it. For me, I got angry. One day, my dad told me that I didn't have the balls to follow through on my talk. I got so mad at him and myself that I set to prove him and my thoughts wrong. The next minute, I was calling up a realtor and I drove down to Stockton, California, which was an hour and 15 minutes away, to look at properties nearby my alma mater college so that I could find one and rent it out to college pharmacy students. I was so excited that after seeing just 3 properties, I put an offer on one of them that late afternoon. However, what happened next really tested my commitment to financial independence through real estate investing. You see, because I was a newbie, I had no idea what to watch out for. In fact, when my realtor told me that I had a 15-year-old roof, I excused myself to go to the bathroom and secretly Googled if a 15-year-old roof was actually a bad thing, or something I should be worried about. What's even worse is when he started throwing around real estate terms such as earnest money deposit or seller credits, I would just stare at him blankly like he was speaking another language, which to me it basically was. But what I found out later is that most people who eventually become successful actually go through this stage of feeling like an imposter in order to get really good at anything. In fact, feeling like an imposter mainly occurs in people who actually want to get things done well versus others who are overconfident and they miss red flags. Imposter syndrome is actually a sign that you're taking this seriously and therefore you're more likely to be successful. The real danger isn't the imposter feeling. It's actually just not having a framework or system for spotting red flags that can cost you a lot of money. But that won't happen to you because next I'll go over the common mistakes that I made that cost me over $30,000 and how you can avoid them. So I bought my first house and my tenant calls me up at 11 p.m. at night and says, "Ryan, there's poop that's spewing out of the kitchen sink and it's all over the kitchen floor. It's backing out into the showers and it smells horrible." I frantically called up plumbers and finally found one to go out there, where he stuck down a camera into the sewage line and found that the entire sewage line was collapsed. I had to replace the entire line, which cost me $9,000. I learned later, however, that I could simply have done a sewage lateral line inspection, which cost maybe $200 or so, and this relatively inexpensive sewage line inspection would have found the issue ahead of time so that I could still negotiate with the seller to cover the cost of the sewage line replacement. Shortly after this, another tenant calls me. His items were apparently melting in his room because the house had no AC during the 100-degree California summers. I shook my head. What more could go wrong? I had to install a mini split AC system which cost me $15,000. Ouch, that hurt. I also had pest issues and a rotting deck that I had to be replaced, and all in all, it cost me over $30,000. But what I realized later is that you can simply get more inspections done during the negotiation phase of the deal. Then you use that as leverage to bring down the home price or to ask the seller for money back as seller credits to cover the cost of repairing the issues. Nowadays, some of the most common inspections that I order are the sewage lateral line inspection as mentioned, a roof inspection, an HVAC inspection, a plumbing inspection, an electrical inspection, and a foundation inspection. In the end, I kind of felt like the seller took advantage of me because there were all these issues that I know they knew about, but they just didn't want to spend the money to fix them. But no use crying over spilled milk. I had to move forward. So how did I actually end up retiring at the age of 31? Well, I had bought my first rental at the age of 23, and I just focused on buying one rental a year and of course renting them out by the bedroom. The first rental lost a lot of money, but I worked a lot of overtime as a pharmacist and had just enough to put a 10% down payment on the second property. I bought that second property as a second home, meaning you have to live in it for at least 14 days out of the year. But by year 3, I had completely ran out of money. That's when my lender taught me something that really opened up my eyes. He said, Ryan, don't you own 2 rentals already? I bet you those rentals have already gone up in value. You don't need to have cash as a down payment every time you buy a property. Instead, what you can do is take out a home equity line of credit, also known as a HELOC, which basically uses the appreciation and equity that you got on your first rental. You can take out that equity as cash and use that as a down payment on your third property. That way, you don't need to constantly raise money from your W-2 job every time you need to buy another rental. So let's do the math on this on the whiteboard. Let's say you buy a $300,000 house. If that house appreciates, which means that its home value goes up, let's say 7% per year, then after 3 years, that house would have gone up 21%. 7% times 3 is 21%. And because you put a 20% down on the house, that means you basically doubled your money. In year 3, you can take out that 21% using a home equity line of credit, which is $60,000 in this case, and use that as a 20% down on your house number 2. Plus, you can do this every 3 years for every property that you own. You can imagine how quickly this method can scale your portfolio if you double the number of properties you own every 3 years. So I basically rinsed and repeated until I have 5 properties, each making $1,500 to $2,000 a month in cash flow. At this point, I had the option to retire, but I stuck around for a bit longer in pharmacy and eventually retired at the age of 31 with 14 properties, with a multiple 6-figure rental income. I finally got what I've been dreaming for so many years as a pharmacist. Being financially free means getting to do what you want, where you want, with whomever you want to do it with. And you also get to choose what you really want to spend your time doing, whether that be seeing your family more often or traveling the world. Personally, I love traveling, and I've been to China, Japan, Vietnam, England, Belize, and many other countries. But here's a question that nobody answered for me when I was starting out. How many properties did I need to be financially independent? Most real estate investors will tell you that you need 30 or 50 doors. Actually, you only need a small fraction of that. And I'll tell you why and exactly how many you really need in this next video. I'll also show you the exact math that proves it right in this video. So click up here and I'll see you in there.